Welcome to our wonderful panel. We have producer Philippa Campbell, writer-director Jake Mahaffy, script editor and development executive Emily Anderton, story advisor Brita Mcveigh, and editor Cushla Dillon, who will be chairing the session. I actually met Cushla when I was about 14. This was my introduction to the film industry. For some random reason, I ended up doing my sixth form work experience on the price of milk. And I got to watch Cushla edit, and that was, it probably was actually for only about half an hour, but it's like one of my formative moments. I haven't forgotten it. Cushla has a massive portfolio of work. She's worked on shorts, feature films, documentaries, commercials, TV, everything. So she's a hugely talented editor, and we're lucky to have her here. She's also running her own projects. So I'll hand over to her, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Eloise. And thank you to Script and Screen for putting us on. We've got a great panel tonight, and what we're going to be talking about tonight is development. What does good development look like? So development is from the initial inception of an idea right through to the first day of shooting. So I guess that encompasses all development. What goes on, what happens to the script, how many people get involved, what kind of help can you get as a writer, what sort of help should you try and find, what sort of help should you try and avoid. So hopefully by the end of this evening you'll have lots of anecdotes, stories, advice, and great information. So I'll just talk a little bit about the panel. Brita here is a script editor, acting coach and director's coach. She's been involved, she's worked closely with Taika and Jermaine on both Eagle vs Shark and with Taika on Boy. And she's also involved with Michelle Saville at the moment, who's a up-and-coming, she made a very successful short film. And so she works in a number of different areas, in both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And we have Emily Anderton, who Emily returned from the UK 4 years ago, where she worked as a development executive for the New Cinema Fund for the UK Film Council. And until recently, she was a freelance script consultant, but now works full-time with Libertine Pictures, and where she is the head of development and is responsible for finding and nurturing new talent and ideas. Jake is an independent filmmaker. He is currently senior lecturer in the television and media studies at Auckland University. He's just finished shooting his first his feature that he had written a script for. Now, usually Jake's films, there's a lot of workshopping and improvisation in the films. He'll tell you a little bit more about them. So for this particular feature, he had a script. He was working from a script that he developed through the Sundance Script Lab. So he's got quite a unique perspective about seeing his script going through the development process in that way. And Philippa Campbell should need no introduction. She's been a regular person here at the Script to Screen. She's also a producer of a number of projects. Her latest one was Top of the Lake with Jane Campion, Rubbings from a Live Man, Rain, Black Sheep No. 2, and she executive produced Orphans and Kingdoms and How Far Is Heaven. Okay, so I'm going to ask Brita, if you would like to talk about your process and how you work with writers as a script consultant. When they come knocking at your door, how do you engage with them and talk about the process?
I feel like I'm the first one into the fray.
Yes.
Like I get the first shot over the top and I'm down. Okay. It's different every time. And it's dependent upon what the writer is asking for consciously and what you sort of determine they need that they don't necessarily know that they need. So someone will come and say, it's just so different all the time, and I don't have a fixed process, but within the processes that exist financially, either someone will come to you with their own funding and say, I just need help with the script, what can you do? I need this, and they'll either be quite specific and you can say, okay, well I can do that or that. I want to sharpen up I want to lose 10 pages, I want to sharpen up the dialogue, I want to make the protagonist deeper, I don't understand what's happening with my protagonist, why have I got this protagonist? That's quite a conscious thing. Or more often people will come to me and say, will you be the script editor on my application to go into the Film Commission? Oh, I don't really know you. Will you be the script editor? Or sometimes people know you. You know, it'll be one of the two things. And you, at that point, I now typically ask if I can have a read of what material they've got, and then determine from the material whether I think I can be of use, and then I will offer up what I can do, which is often a fixed time frame engagement with their process. Yeah, so sometimes, like tomorrow I'm starting with somebody, I'm working with them for 3 days on a romantic comedy, and we're deepening the relationships. That's what we're doing. And I'm doing 3 days with them, and then I'm having a read of their material and doing some notes in a Skype session, and then I literally say, and then you're on your own.
So Emily, why would somebody have a script editor on a script? Why would they come to you? What could you bring to the script?
I mean, based on what I can tell, I mean, I only got back to New Zealand 4 years ago, but it seems that a big thing that's happened is the Film Commission wants you to have a script editor. So that seems to be one of the main reasons you'd have a script editor. But if the broader question is why have somebody help you through the development process, the answer might be because two reasons. One is that when you are writing your script, it's incredibly hard to see it from all the many dimensions that it has. I think film is really difficult because when you see a film, you're actually stepping into an alternative reality. I don't mean just if it's science fiction, but whatever the genre or format, you're entering a world, and that world is completely three-dimensional, not in the, CGI way, but emotionally three-dimensional. You expect all the characters to feel real and have the dimensions of real people and all the exchanges between them to have all the nuances and subtleties of real exchanges, and yet it still will have this force that is the plot pushing you through. It has so many different elements to it, and I think even very, very experienced writers benefit from somebody sitting outside of that completely interior situation that they're in, inside this world, and saying some really glaringly obvious things, or asking them some questions that just make them interrogate that dimensional world and look at it from different perspectives. And why you might get a development person or a script editor to do that as opposed to your producer or your husband or someone else involved in the process is simply because of the value of somebody who is very good at that or is very experienced in that. It can ask the right questions, hopefully, and talk to you in a way that hopefully doesn't really insult you, but also challenges you. And some producers are great at that, and others aren't. So that's another reason for having a script editor or someone in that sort of function. And I guess the Film Commission recognise that too. And one of the things that's tricky about public funding, like Film Commission funding, is that they can't play that role. They don't have time, and their relationship with you is the sort of the feeding relationship. They give you money, and you go away and spend it, and then you come back and ask for more money, and it's only really at that connection that they provide you with some sort of creative response to your project. This is not really a functional development relationship at all, and I think they recognise that as much as anybody else. So obviously they've encouraged this development of script editors being attached to projects to create that support and that constant, or not constant forever, but intensive relationship.
Thanks, Emily. Jake, so you've always retained creative control over your, well, would you call them scripts? They're kind of templates really for what you went into production with in your previous features. So with this, what's it called? Free Indeed. You had a script that you went to the script lab at Sundance with. Do you want to talk about that process?
No, labs. So you guys, I don't know how much you know about the Sundance labs, but they have the Sundance Institute has the festival, and they also have these labs, which they've now expanded to documentary, and they're doing an episodic, which is kind of like a TV series type lab, but it started with these writer-directors labs. So you get in with a screenplay, a feature-length screenplay, and usually some previous work, whether they're shorts or other features, and you go in and you end up spending several weeks, but the main core of it is, I think, about 4 or 5 weeks out at Sundance in Utah, and they fly in different actors and consultants and filmmaking people, and come in and basically advise you on the project. And you shoot scenes, practice scenes, test scenes from your screenplay, and you also go through the writer's lab where they take it and you critique it and have discussions about it. And so it's really useful and really helpful. And a lot of people have gone through them and made films that you would have seen or heard of. So I had the good fortune of going through that, and this film went through that, and that was back in 2006, and I just shot it in Memphis 2 months ago. So it took that long to get it made. I'm still editing. I'm just editing now. So that's the process at the labs, and the idea there is that they're bringing in people with different perspectives and points of view and different backgrounds, and the main sort of goal there is not that you change your film in some way or develop it in a way that's fulfilling anyone's objective, but they're trying to get you to clarify and articulate your own perspective as the filmmaker, the writer-director. So that's why it's a great experience. You're not ending up making someone else's film. You might, but that's your problem later on. It's in the course of the lab, it's really about them getting you to articulate to yourself by being challenged what it is that you're trying to do and why that matters and why that might be different.
So Philippa, do you want to talk about your process from a producing point of view?
Well, as both Brita and Emily have said, it's every process is different, every filmmaker is different, every story is different, every project, the ideas behind it are different. So the process varies enormously, and I think there's a degree of improvisation involved, which is important, so that there is a spontaneity of some kind, because I think that's something that producers, we are there for a long time, years and years, hopefully, or for the time it takes for a film to be made. So I don't, there are certain sort of exercises that I do all the time that I've learned to do that work for me, because I have a private thing that I do, and then there's the public thing that you do in meetings with your filmmaker or your writer or your writer-director. But one of the points that sort of came to my mind when you were talking about why you might have a script editor is that it's the beginning sometimes of the filmmaker or the writer-director or the team even speaking in public about their work. And I think that's one of the hard things. In this business, in this creative industry, there's private work that a writer does and there's public work, and sometimes you end up doing, they're very different things. It's not a novelist sits writing privately, and the reading experience of a novel is very intimate between, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, but you sit by yourself with a book. reading it. So you kind of, it's much more, it is intimate. A movie, we come into this space, we're here together, we witness something, we go into that, we suspend our disbelief, we go into that imagined world. You've got to kind of open yourself to it, or the film seduces you in some way. And I think that the navigating for creative people working in this world, navigating the boundaries between private and public and how to best express and most appropriately communicate the different tensions, or the different aspirations of the story, it's one of the most important elements of what happens in development. Of course, there's a lot of craft stuff and there's a whole lot of quite practical work to be done, but there's also a kind of emotional and communicative job that filmmakers enter into, because in the end they're going to be communicating to audiences all over the world, complete strangers, but in a very intimate kind of a way, a strange, magical, wonderful way. And I think that that's a really, sometimes quite untouchable, but quite important thing. And I know when I come away from the 3 days or the 1 hour or whatever it is with a colleague, and there has been some sort of magical exchange, it's a great, that feeling enlivens you, doesn't it? Just the way you walk out of a movie and you feel changed. And that's one of the untouchable things that I think is kind of good to acknowledge. You might not understand it, you might have words for it, but if you feel it, it's a great thing to also acknowledge and just remember, put in the memory bank of your own creative process, whether you're the script editor or the filmmaker or the producer.
So can I just ask you, that to me sounds like good development, that feeling of excitement and change. So what would bad development be, if there's an anecdote that you can remember of? I'm sure there must be, I'm sure we can all...
You want me to tell people about all the bad things I do as a producer? I'm just not gonna go there, Cushla. I guess, an experience is erupting into my memory before my eyes. I think it's around questions of judgment, actually. As an editor, you take people's work, you bring it in, you learn it, you know it, you go through it, you forensically kind of live with it in a particular way, and editors keep themselves open to possibilities, and you also have to encourage your director to keep themselves open to possibilities, or open themselves up to new possibilities. And sometimes there is, we're all very sensitive about subtext. And so I guess, when I've really screwed up in a development process, it's been when I haven't listened, or I've blurted out, or I've judged something and I've hurt someone's feelings, and it's really awful. So those are the question of judgment. When someone gave me a script the other day, and I know that handing over is a huge deal, and if you forget that, or if you don't acknowledge it, or you don't try to respond in the manner in which it's handed over, there's a glitch. So there's all sorts of ways you can screw up. I don't know, does anybody else screw up?
I'm going to pick up right where you left off. Mainly because I don't know if Cushla meant us to reveal our bad habits, and you're so awesome for doing it. I'm going to crack right in there and say that I think that, yes, I think that's something that we can all be guilty of, but I also have noticed that, and it's a good thing to be aware of as a writer, if you're working with someone good or bad, that I've recently became very frustrated with someone that I was working with and I wasn't aware of it. I kept thinking that we were moving forward and going down deeper into the material, and the writer was moving sideways every time. And my frustration brimmed up in a meeting in the form of an entire 2-hour session of what ifs. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Like a really lazy, bad script editing thing to do is, what if she was this? What if that was that? What if that was... It's sort of like a co-writer with nothing on the line. You know, it's just not, to me, that is just not the job, because you've got nothing at stake. So you can riff all you like, but really, to me, the job is to listen and to try and apply good craft questions to pull the story out of the heart of the writer in the best possible way. So that was me going, oh my God, I was frustrated. I was trying to hurry things up. And then I realised it, and then we had a Skype, and I said all of this and gave it back to her and apologised. And it was actually very healthy for our process, because in the process of having to say that, I had to acknowledge that I'd become conscious of what she'd been doing, and we could then talk actually to what was really happening. So that it sounds like therapy, doesn't it?
Emily, do you think that your... Sorry, if you could just pass. I'm sorry. Are you there to develop the script or to develop the writer? All this are sometimes...
Is a script editor? Sometimes.
And again, as a development executive, really?
As a script editor, often the writer. Not always. But if you're talking about a lot of, you know, people have different levels of experience, and some just need you as a script editor to ask some good naughty questions, and they'll go away with that and work on that, and others need a lot more guidance and ways of thinking about things, and then talking about, yeah, it's just different. So sometimes, yeah, you are developing the writer. And some of those early development funds, that's what they're there for too. I think everybody hopes that a good film script will come out of it, but I think also there is a double intention of supporting promising talent and putting your all behind them and seeing where they get to. As a development person at Libertine, it's a slightly more pressured situation. We have to find films to make. We have got, the only caveat to that is that we have got a couple of years to, if the funding goes for 3 years, so if there is somebody we really believe in, but they are at an earlier stage in developing their craft, we could take that long view with them. But by the same token, we need to be making films quickly, so I certainly can't be looking at too many of those options. It has to be balance on the slate of people who are more experienced and people who are going to take a bit longer to get there.
So, Emily, why do you think it is that some projects get stuck?
Oh man. There are a million reasons why a project would get stuck, and then very few reasons why a project would get made. I mean, where to begin? I mean, there are so many stages along the process. If you're just talking about the development process, you may not know really what the project is when you go into it. You may have a really great idea, but haven't really figured out why you're attracted to that idea, or what the power of it might be that's underneath it that's actually going to sustain a feature film. So some of them you'll get there and find it, and some of them you won't. And that's just the development phase. That's before anybody's even seen it. And then the project goes out to financiers, of which the Film Commission may be one or maybe not. Then you enter another round of development. You think the script editor was hard. If you're talking about development, difficult development situations, then I've seen some pretty, the classic situation where just someone breezes in, throws a bomb on the floor, and then leaves, and you all have to deal with it. And they're the person with the money. So that sort of thing happens a lot. And then you've got to get through the production, and then it washes up in your office, and you've got to stitch it all back together. I mean, there are so many ways. It's such a miracle that films get made, and there are so many delicate points along the way. And I think it's very understandable that writers feel that what they are producing is their work, because they're putting everything into making something as complete and perfect as they can, but that is really just the starting point. And I don't know what I'm saying now, waffling. Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why films don't get made. It is frustrating. You mentioned this before, because I think everybody's got bad development stories and can pin the blame on someone or other. But the reality is that even really, really good, well-crafted stories don't always get made, because they just might not be the kind of film that can fill a theatre like this. So there are a lot of reasons why good stories don't get made and why good writers don't get the breaks that they may or may not deserve. It's a capricious situation.
Does anyone else want to add to that about why, when projects get stuck, when there's a sort of the development grinds to a standstill, and what are the different strategies that a writer could have to get things moving again?
I don't know if this is very helpful, but several times, you kind of feel like you're in the middle. I describe it to myself as being in the middle of a concrete wall. Almost, like there's been concrete poured on you, like a worse version of those dreadful people who are red or white and do strange small movements in parks. And but thankfully no one can see you because you're covered in concrete. But often that's the point. I don't know, there's a kind of a patience thing where if you can get through that, it's like you're about to go somewhere else. It's almost a sense of kind of confusion and paralysis and just sort of stuckness. But if you still have the energy, or there's something still driving you, that wall is there to be broken through. There is. I felt that a number of times and observed it in my colleagues, and you kind of have to keep the faith, I think. That's, I'm sort of using awfully sort of emotional new agey language, so it's been a long day. But you sort of do, and sometimes, and also I think of yourself as perpetrators, not victims. I think that's a really important thing. But also, and this has happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to many of us, is sometimes the time for a project has gone. And sometimes you just have to go, I love this, but it's going in the bottom drawer, but I'm going to keep looking at it, because someone else is going to love it again too. It's a really big commitment that you all have as artists to your own creative work. And I think kind of getting stuck is quite healthy. I think there's a couple of things have happened to me in the last week. I was trying to think of anecdotes, I received a script, well, three of us received a script last Thursday morning, and I was Wednesday morning I was travelling away. I printed it out, it was distributed, and we got this fantastic covering letter from the writer going, hoo-hoo, and I was so excited, and I put it in my suitcase with me, and then the next morning I got up really early, and there was another email saying, don't read that one. Don't read that one. This is going to sound really strange, but I had a dream. And the actor who was cast to play one of the lead characters came to me in the dream and said, you haven't written the fucking ending yet. So I've just written the ending. This is the real ending. And, it was fantastic. And apart from the fact that I didn't want to have to read it on my computer screen because I'm old-fashioned and I like bits of paper, and I mean, you will have all felt that moment when you send something and you think, oh no, you know, it's happened to me a number of times, but that was perhaps the most dramatic version of it. And I love the fact that the actor had come to the writer in a dream and
Does
just
an actor know that they've been cast in the dream?
yes. Well, the actor doesn't know about the dream, but they know that they've been cast, and kind of gave the writer a boot up the bum and said, you haven't sorted out my ending. And it's happened now. It was really good fun.
Jake, do you have any stories about the difficulties of getting your project to the first day of shooting? How was that for you?
I mean, this is all just foreign to me, this whole process, because it's just stuff that it's self-generated. So the only obstacles are things that I manage myself. So, I mean, there's no development stories really. I mean, really nothing.
But
Good question.
But surely it's you. You yourself may at times be the problem.
I suppose no. I mean, I just give myself a certain external parameters, you know, things that I have to do, and because I never feel ready to actually go shoot, and then but I just make myself do it and get everyone together, and once everyone's in one place at one time, we just start making the movie. That's how we do it.
Make it sound effortless.
No, I mean, it's never required approval, so I don't know exactly. This is foreign to me.
Did you work on a script? You had a script for this last one, didn't you? Did you have outside eyes that you used in the years since the labs through to having a script that you started shooting?
Yeah, I think, yeah. There were, I mean, there were different producers that looked at it, that were on board and then moved off board. And Sundance continued looking at it and sent it out if I asked them to. So they would continue looking, reading, and offering suggestions and things. But I didn't, it was basically, it was self-directed. I mean, I went through 30 odd drafts of it. So, the one that went through the labs then was completely rewritten. And just as I continued to research and develop, because it was based on a true story, so when I actually went and met the people that it was based on and did a lot of research, then I would change it. But it was mainly just as going to these different, because then there were other labs, like not labs, but like, what do they call them? Like, no, what are these, like where you go and people sit at a table and they pitch their movies and stuff. Like, what is that called? Markets, yeah. Sorry, so there was like the Cannes, we were there, and at IFP and Rome and all these. And so sitting down and talking to people and hearing their questions, just synopsizing the film, sort of answering people's questions, seeing where they were interested and where they weren't, that helped me just crystallize in my mind what the film was about, so that was helpful. But as far as people sitting down, reading it through and editing, that never happened. I just did it on my own. Yeah.
How did you get a producer for that project? Did they see the script, or did they know your previous work?
No, so with this one, it was, the film was it's a very dark, sort of difficult film, so people weren't dying to make it and make a bucket load of money on it. So basically what happened was the producer that is making the film, Mike Ryan, he saw one of my features at South by Southwest, and he just saw the film and came out and said, we got to talk, and then just ran away, disappeared somewhere. And so someone said, oh, you got to talk to that guy. So basically I followed up with him and just said, what do you want to talk about? And he asked me if I had a film, so we started that way. And then he got actors, he got the script actors, and they got on board, and then we just got the money and made it. So.
Okay, so there's many voices in the development process. There's the funding body, there's the script editor, there's the producer and the writer. So what are the tools that a writer can have to discern which of those voices they should listen to at which point? Brita?
Can I pass the buck for a minute while I think about that?
I'd say if a writer, it really starts right at the beginning, and I think you've got to be careful about who you start working with. So they say that what makes, that a film is made when you cast it, somebody said that. But it's a bit like that with a writer, I think, choosing the people you're going to work with, who are going to bring your project to life. And you have to make sure at that really early stage that they get it and they get you, and that everybody wants to make the same movie, which is what everybody says, but you really have to make sure everybody wants to make the same movie, and that means you have to talk a lot. You can't just sort of sit and quietly know that you're a genius and expect other people to appreciate exactly what kind of genius you are and what flavour that is and how it translates. You have to talk and talk and talk and assume that people have misunderstood if they haven't given you some indication that they don't. I mean, you really have to make sure that people understand what it is that you want to do. And then, along the development process, that might change. So then you have to keep talking to make sure that everybody else is still on board with a slightly different project now that you've completely switched your protagonist and and it's turned funnier than you ever expect. Then you have to keep checking in and making sure everybody's still making the same film, and that seems to me the best thing you can do as a writer to avoid this development sinkhole or whatever it is, because so often it is because people have started having a different understanding about what it is the project should be and what the writer should be doing, and the writer isn't thinking that at all, and so you end up having all these cross-purpose conversations, or not really having conversations at all, but just getting really cross with each other, and there, you can see where that goes. So I just think making sure your relationship with your producer and director, if they're put at that stage, is really good. They really understand it, that you're having really honest, detailed conversations about everything about it. Tone, especially. Tone. You can't talk about tone too much. I don't hear enough people talk about tone, but what could be more important to a successful film than its tone? So watch films together, talk about why it's halfway between this film and this film tonally, but there's a little bit of that register and how you're going to get it there, and really detailed, subtle conversations. Not just about, where that character should get run over, blah. The real stuff, the subtle things, that's what makes the movie.
So Philippa, if a writer came to you with an idea, what's your process about making sure that you both are making the same film? What sort of questions do you ask?
I'll ask myself a lot of questions. You can only read something for the first time once, so that's a very important experience. And it's different if I know the person and if I don't know them. So there's a kind of getting to know you process if I don't know them, which is important on both sides, I guess. And I sort of try to find out. I try to figure out what the writer's vision for the whole thing is, and come to understand without invading them get a feeling for what the real deep connection is, which the writer may not actually quite might not be able to speak about, because we make these things in order to come to understand something that we don't know. So there's a lot of mystery in the process of filmmaking, which is necessary, and that's scary, and that's where the originators of the work take the biggest risks. Producers take enormous risks. Investors don't want to take any risks. So or only take very calculated risks. So you've got to kind of, from a personal point of view, you've got to kind of come to some sort of understanding about your relationship with risk and your writer or your director or your writer-director's relationship with risk, what that means. And I guess taste, is an important thing, whole lots of questions. Is that a reasonable list?
So if we're talking about collaboration, because I think we can all agree that this is a collaborative process, what happens, what would your, Brita, what would your strategy be to open up a writer a little bit? Say someone who's a little less experienced and is a little bit insecure and perhaps a bit closed up to that idea of collaborating or to be responsive to feedback. Do you have any kind of strategies for opening them up a little bit?
It's different every time. It sort of extends upon what Philippa was saying at the outset of how you've got to ask yourself a lot of questions, but you're sort of, and you can often sense where a writer might have some blind spots just from the material. And do you guys find that? You can feel it in the writer. And if you know them or if you don't know them, it's different. So there's the getting to know you process where you have a hunch about someone and you have a hunch about what you might need to be investigating to try and open things up for them and then help them move forward, obviously quickly if appropriate. But you don't know until you start asking questions. A lot of it's asking questions and trying to find the key for that person to whatever it is that is got a problem. Because often you're just there because there's a problem. All I am. You're there to assist with opening something up in the writer and therefore in the story. Because in a way they are, that question of are you developing the writer, are you developing the script, they're kind of one and the same for me. And a writer is at a different stage with a different script than they were with a previous script. So yeah, it really depends. With someone I just started off getting them to try and draw because I could tell, I had a sense that was where one part of their brain was really uninhibited. And so we just worked with pictures quite a lot before we started. It's different every time.
Emily, do you think it's your job to challenge the writer, or do you think it's really up to the writer to push themselves?
Yeah, both. It's definitely my job to challenge the writer and challenge the work in as useful a way as I can. That's the asking the right question thing. But it's the writer's job to own it and drive it forward. I think, if I'm honest, that's something I do find a bit frustrating, is a sort of falling into a bit of a back seat, the writer, I mean, sort of, and becoming too dependent on you, or just becoming a bit like you're their school teacher and it's homework or something like that. They're never going to get anywhere with that sort of it. You know, they have to own it, they have to own the vision of it, they have to also, they have to fight for it. That can be another worrying sign, is if you have a lot of conversations with a writer about a project and they're not fighting back. Not that you're trying to start a fight, but if you are challenging and they're just sort of going, yeah, I could change that, yeah, I could change that, yeah, I'll change that. You sort of come out of that meeting going, what just happened? I don't want to feel like I am writing the screenplay, and if I am actually coming to, after 2 hours or whatever, coming to the point where I'm coming up with ideas, I start thinking, that's not great. I'm not a writer, and I think my ideas are probably pretty bad. And if the meeting has got to that corner, then I think there's something wrong with the process, and I think the writer's lost the vision of it a bit. But that's a delicate balance, because, you know, if you're not very experienced as a writer, you're in that situation to learn something. So it's a delicate balance, and that they're feeling their way as well. And of course, you know, if they think you've got more experience or something, they're going to take on board what you say. That's where you have to be careful as a script editor, I think, to be bringing out their vision for it, even though it's always tempting to lob an idea in there, but I always feel bad about it afterwards.
So I'm kind of getting the impression here that it's about the writer having a bit more confidence and a bit more ownership of their ideas before they engage with a collaborator or I guess a script editor.
Well, I think they can be open to change. There's nothing wrong with change. It's just then owning the change and feeling confident about that and feeling like that's a decision that you've made and that's the right decision. And I think it's quite easy to get a bit adrift for a writer in a development situation. Really easy, actually. Depending on their personality, you know, but and if they don't have a lot of experience, then they're even more vulnerable to that. So, yeah, if things are changing, they can slow it down, they can take a break, they can step back, but they have to always be feeling that the choices they're making work with them, or at least work them, you know, they have to not feel like somebody else is driving their project.
Can I say one comment on that?
My language for that is a lot of the job is just trying to empower the writer all the time. Don't you guys find that? In subtle ways, like you're engaged in a relationship, but you're positively transferring responsibility to them a lot. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay, we are probably at the point where we could open up for any questions from the floor.
Yeah. I was wondering, as working as an editor and acting as an outside eye, and kind of touches on that with an experienced writer's thing, how do you keep your voice honest towards another person's work? Does that make sense?
Did you want to ask someone specifically,
Not
or
really,
just
no.
does anyone want to?
What do you mean by honest?
So, like when you're engaging with something, how do you engage with it fresh each time? Is there things that you go through, or?
That's a slightly different thing. Is that what you mean by honest? With each time you read it, try to be fresh?
Yeah.
You can't, but you do try, but...
Excuse me, we can't hear either of your questions or answer.
I think, did you ask how do you keep fresh when you're rereading it, or did you mean something else?
I'm not sure how to articulate, but what I mean is honest. So like when you like get a script as an editor, how do you sort of avoid your experience clouding meeting this thing for the first time?
Do you mean when you first read it, or when you?
And when you start acting as an outside eye, when you start asking those questions, when you start challenging the others.
Your experience is what you're drawing on, though, I think, when you read it the first time. I'm not sure if I understand your question.
I work with student projects, so it's a bit different, but the first thing I do is I try to understand what the writer means. Like, first of all, I read it, I look at it and say, okay, this is what it does, this is what I get out of it. On the face of it, this is the thing. That's what exists, that's what's real. And I've obviously understand it through the filter of my own experience and intellect. Okay, that's it. And then I go and I say, okay, there's the writer, what do you mean? What did you mean? Is this, because this is what I understood. I always understand there's a difference between what I read and what the intent might be. And then I explain, okay, either we can go for what your intent is, or we can work with what this is, if they're not totally, together. You know what I mean? If they're sort of divergent in any way. So I try to make it clear that what I'm offering, as far as opinions, are just that, are opinions. That this is just me, and you can value that or not on your own scale. You know what I mean? As the writer, but. So I always preface it with that kind of disclaimer that this is just as an opinion. And then, but I'm also trying to understand what the writer means, if they can articulate it. Does that make sense? So that way, it's not about, oh, I see this and it should be that. It's more like, okay, I see this, but let's make it what you meant. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to do.
That's a very good answer, and that reminds me when I used to do a lot of script reading for production companies, the process was always read it, figure out what film are they trying to make, and then work backwards and say, well, here's why that's not working. So you always try to get into their mode rather than, oh, I'd like this to be more like this, if that makes sense.
Because I think there's exceptions to this, but my feeling about it is that people want to make, okay, there's a lot of exceptions, but my experience, what I would like to do in my experience with other people is that people want to make films that have something unique about them, right? That there's impetus, there's a desire to make something that's not like everything else necessarily. So in the way that happens is by someone feeling strongly about what they're doing. And so you have to feel strongly about it, but at the same time be open, not feel threatened, or if you do feel threatened, not to show it and sort of accept input. You know what I mean? Wherever it's and try to evaluate that input where you think it sits. Take notes of it, think about it, and then come back to it later when you're not so, like, you're not just shaking or upset about it or whatever it is, you know what I mean? So you come back to it and be like, okay, that upset me because that person was a jerk, or that upset me because actually they're right and I have to rewrite this thing, or what, you figure it out on your own. But I think, everyone's got opinions, but they're not right or wrong, they're just opinions. And you just kind of have to sort it out, I think.
For Brita, usually when you have, you would get across contradicting ideas when it comes to suggestions within the story. How do you manage to deal with the abuse?
I mean, that was quite interesting, that guy you...
Oh, the guy who likes to well, yeah, I did just tell these guys before we started. A colleague of mine in London was a development executive, and he would have meetings with this writer, and every time the writer would be up on his feet having a fight with him, like really, really wanted to get really loud and yell at him, basically. And this colleague of mine realised that was his process, but this colleague of mine also thought life was a bit too short for that writer. Yeah.
When you're developing scripts, do you look at the point of view of genre? So if you get a script, you go, some sort of love story, do you genreize it or lead the writer in that direction? And if plots are kind of amorphous, do you have something where you use like basic plotting, such as a Rags to Riches story or a Rebirth story or some sort, and bring it together with genre so that the writers go a direction you go? Or do you leave it as they sort of come from their heart and hopefully produce a puzzle that itself?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah.
So the question was, the question was, just tell me if I got this right. You're asking if the script editor should determine what the genre is, or should be able to help shape.
It's not sure what it is. Do you genreize it? Because on a slate, right? Because at the end of the day, you're getting paid. Otherwise, you could die, start and die. Thanks. So, like for a slate, would you genreize a film? Say we need a horror film, an action film, and a romantic drama, and then help direct a script in that way if you feel that you don't know what the script is?
No.
No?
No, you would try to work out what that script was trying to be first, rather than saying, I need a romantic comedy. You must turn this into a romantic comedy.
Because it's all just story, script's just a story.
Yeah.
So when you're in a story, it's usually clear what it is beforehand.
Sorry, say that again?
All stories are like, you're going to get a certain kind of plotting, correct? You're going to get a Rag to Riches story, or a rebirthing kind of story, or a voyage and return story, and so on and so forth. So when you're editing, do you have those things in your mind in order to help the writer make their story more succinct?
I think you can. I think they're part of your toolbox, as it were, if that's appropriate for that story. So if you're working on a genre story that lends itself to that model, and that's what the writer wants to do, and that seems like the best route for that story, then yeah, you would look at those models if that's helpful. But only if the story led you to that, and I think that's just one of a number of tools you would
so you
use.
With a story without a genre?
Would you look at a
story with no genre and no basic plots? And then go just figure out what it is.
Yes.
That takes a lot of time.
A lot of stories like that, yeah.
So what's the result of that?
Experimental film. No. Drama. No. I mean, art house film.
Even if you saw the elements of like, this is obviously a rebirth story, we can pull it into this area here and give it a flick of action. Boom, it'll sell more. You wouldn't do that. You just go let it have lots of shadows and weird music.
A lot of things would go into that decision. Like, does that suit the story? Is that the writer's intention? Is the writer best suited to write that material? Do we have within our means the capacity to make a film like that?
Right.
There are a lot of questions. You certainly don't shoehorn anything in. I'm more of the, it's got to come out of the story and the writer. And then if what comes out of the story and the writer, speaking as a production company or as in my previous role as a film financier, if what comes out of the story and the writer isn't something you want to make or want to fund, then you don't. But you don't try to twist it into something that you would rather make. Do you approach it more of a mystery? It's like a mystery you have to find out. At the end there might be some gold or there might be a swamp. That's sort of the approach. I don't think about it like that.
It seems to me that there's a sort of a confusion about whether you're a co-writer or a script editor.
I think what he's saying is given a story, would you say, oh, this could be commercial if it was just hit these beats a little bit more tightly, and so would you try to push it into one of those sort of existing arcs, shall we say? And the answer would be, if that suited the story and that was what the writer wanted to do, if that was what they were into, then you might do that. But I don't think you can really force it upon a project that doesn't want to be that kind of project. Ultimately, only the writer is going to write the project. So you can't get the writer to do something that they're not naturally inclined to do. It just doesn't work. So.
One of my questions was, do you like to engage the writer with issues of directorial decisions and audience decisions, or do you like to keep that out of the development process? Brita?
It's different every time. Occasionally you discuss audience in order to dig a bit deeper with the writer about who they're trying to talk to, but not from a market perspective. Or, I mean, if they use that language, you might use that language. You might mirror that language back to them and then dig around with it a bit. I personally don't much talk about that, no. And directorial, that depends if you're working with a writer-director or a writer, yeah. It's about ownership. So if it's the writer, I don't tend to talk about the director, because you want the writer to have as much ownership as possible whilst they've got it, you know. That's just me.
Emily, do you have a feeling about that? Trying to keep that sort of idea of audience, director, those kind of external things from the writing process.
I think that they're not very useful at the early stages, where the writer is trying to figure out some basics about their story and things to do with audience, and where in the back of your head you're thinking about what kind of film it would be and how you would get it made and what audience it would be. They're going on in the back of your head, but they're not really going to be that helpful to the writer. In advanced development, that is a conversation I would have with the writer, but it wouldn't be, do you know you have to change this or it won't reach an audience? It would more be, my approach is more, what is your intention with this? Say it's the ending, so it's the ending. What is your intention with this ending? What were you hoping would come across? And then I say, here's what I got out of it. And they go, oh. And then, so it's almost like I'm the audience. And so that is an audience conversation, because it's about, and then I start to have conversations about the what you want the audience to leave with, what sort of emotions, what sort of feelings and those sort of things, which is an audience conversation, but not in that calculated demographic way. It's about okay, now let's start to think about the impact of this, and do we need to make some subtle shifts and balances, because the effect you really want is not really happening yet, and you might need to just adjust all the little bits and bobs to get there.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Cushla, hi. My question is really about connection to the script and to the project, and I mean this in a way, often you're given scripts by people you know and by friends, and you want to love the script because you're given it by a friend and you want to be involved in the project, but you don't have a true connection to the script, and it's not necessarily about quality, it's about whether it speaks to you. It just might not be the kind of thing that speaks to you. Do you think you can be helpful in a development process if you don't really love the script?
Philippa, that's a good question for you.
Well, to go back, somebody over there used the word honest before. Depending on what your relationship with the person who's given you the script is, if you can clearly and humanely, and articulately express your response, and tease out of your response some questions that the script raised, your experience of imagining the film, because that's what you will have done reading the script, some questions that inspired in you, I think that can be potentially can be helpful. Yeah, I do.
The exception for that for me is horror, because it's not something I watch, and I think it has very different rules to drama or a lot of other genres of film that I do watch. So I don't work on horror because I think I might steer them up the wrong path.
Okay, this is weird. I am exactly the same. That's, for exactly the same reasons.
Yeah.
Just that genre. Yeah.
Oh, at least it's like, arty, grown-up genre. It's all psychological. That's okay.
Do we have to finish? We've got time for...
Yeah, we do have to finish.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, everybody. We're actually, because there's a film starting here in 15 minutes, usually we would sort of be able to go a little bit over, but unfortunately this evening. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. What a great discussion. I've just had a text saying the pizza's a little bit late, so it might be there when you get out, but maybe just wait a minute for it. You're welcome to all have a slice and stay on for another drink and continue the conversation outside. If you haven't seen Her, maybe you want to come back into the cinema and see that. I must thank our lovely sponsors, the biggest of which is the New Zealand Film Commission. We wouldn't be here if they didn't support us to do what we do every year. Also the ASB Community Trust. The lovely Images and Sound, who spend a lot of time helping us put these talks up on our website. Also to White Studios for their gear. Thank you to Duncan Pacey for helping us out with the filming as well. And Jessica gave you a survey when you came in. That is so you can tell our funders who comes to our talks and give them a bit of information about that. And we'd love to keep getting that funding, so if you could fill those out and give them back to us at the table, that would be fantastic. Thank you.